Hi, this is Mr. Word. Now, put this in the category of things that look way harder than they actually are. So you've been given this thing with all variables, x to the y power equals z, and you want to figure out what z is when x equals 3 and y equals 4. Well, that means we're just going to replace x and y with 3 and 4. So x becomes 3 and y becomes 4. So we're figuring out what 3 to the 4th power is. And that equals z. And so 3 to the 4th power is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 9 times 9, which means z is 81. So that's 81. It won't let me write out there, so I'll put it there. So that's 81. So z is 81. What is the x value when y is 3 and z is 125? Okay, cool. Now we want to know what x is. If we're raising x to the 3rd power to get 125. Okay, so something times itself. You're using it as a factor 3 times. That's what to the 3rd power means. Gets you 125. And we can split 125 into its factors. 5 times 25. And 25 can further be split into 5 times 5. And we pretty quickly can see that 125 is constructed out of 3 factors of 5. We want to find one of them, so 5 to the 3rd power equals 125. Our answer is just 5. So it is 5. Now, you need to explain your steps, and there are a variety of ways you could do that, but you could say x to the 3rd is 125, so we need a number that is times itself that equals 125. We can break 125 into 3 equal factors of 5, so 5 times 5 times 5, or 5 cubed, equals 125, and that answers that. Now, a student rewrote the equation like this. The y root of z equals x. Is the value x a rational number when y is 2 and z is 2? Okay, so what we are saying now is, I'll rewrite this. So we're writing, so y is going to be 2, and z is going to be 2, and that equals x. So what we're saying here is we're saying the square root of 2, okay, is x. Well, the square root of 2 is not a rational number. The square root of 2 is an infinitely long decimal. Starts about 1.4, and it goes on forever. Does not settle into a repeating pattern. So no, it is not a rational number. It is a square root of we have a square root of a prime number, and a square root of a prime number is not going to be rational. Square roots of perfect squares will be rational, and some square roots of decimals that are scale, or numbers that are scaled up or scaled down versions of perfect squares, can sometimes be rational, but usually not. So 6.25 is 2.5 squared. 2.25 is 1.5 squared, because 15 squared is 225, and 625 is 25 squared. But this is not. This is a square root of 2, which is one of the most famous irrational numbers of all time, and led to the murder of a heretical member of Pythagoras's 300-member all-male math cult in the ancient history of geometry, because he spilled the beans about irrational numbers. That's a fascinating story. You should find out about it. Part D, write an integer value of y and an integer value of z that makes the equation true when x is 8. Okay, so I'm assuming we're referring to the first equation in the top. And that's a little bit of an ambiguity in this situation. If they're referring to the equation at the top, we are going to say x is 8, and we'll say, okay, 8 to some power equals some power. So if z was 1, I'm sorry, if y was 1, well, then z equals 8. If y is 2, then z equals 64. However, if they're talking about this equation, then we need to do this. So we're going to say x is 8. So here. And hopefully on the MCAS, they will ask a question with less ambiguity. But if x is 8, then we could put 64 for z if we're using the equation from part C, if we're using this equation. So we could say z is 64 and y is 2 because the square root of 64 is 8. So that works as well. All right, I hope that was helpful, and I'm sorry that this last part of the MCAS question was written with ambiguity. I tried to approach it in both directions. Just restating that if we're using the first equation and x is 8, then y could be 1 and z could be 8, y could be 2 and z could be 64, y could be 3 and z could be 512 because 8 to the third power is 512. If we're using the second one, the y root of z equals 8, well, you could set up a square root of 64 equals 8, where y is 2 and z is 64. All right, and that is that.